Breaking news here just coming in. 2 Israelis have been injured in a suspected terror attack in central Israel. For more on this story, we're joined in studio by I-24 News defense correspondent Jonathan Regev. Jonathan, what else can you tell us?
This happening roughly 10-15 minutes ago in the area of Tzrifin. 2 people were injured in what seems to be a stabbing attack. Police are now saying that 1 suspect has been arrested, another one possibly fled. These are initial reports. It's happening roughly 15 minutes ago. The area.
There's some live images from the junction. Jonathan, please. Sorry.
Exactly, in a very central junction, we have to say, located some 15 minutes outside of Tel Aviv, to the east of Tel Aviv, already en route to Jerusalem. This is an area which used to house, up until a few years ago, used to house a very big military base. That base now has been dismantled and taken further south to other locations in Israel, and this is more of a residential area. Still some military installations there, but mostly a residential area known as Tzrifin in Israel, and this is happening some 15 minutes ago. Of course, when we look at this, we have to remember exactly the context. We're in the midst of Ramadan, and there were concerns that similar things can happen. If we remember last year, Ramadan was a very violent time, and this year is now also we're seeing an uptick in violence, and now comes this report. Again, we do not know exactly what's behind this. Everything is very initial reports. 2 Israelis injured in this stabbing attack in the area of Tzrifin, just outside the city of Rishon LeZion, a suburb of Tel Aviv. This is happening roughly a short time ago.
And of course, this comes amid a very tense situation from various fronts. We saw a shooting yesterday in the north. Is this going to escalate, you think?
It might be the case. I mean, Israel feels sort of encircled now. We saw that unidentified aerial vehicle crossing from Syria earlier this week on a Saturday night. We heard of another UAV coming from Gaza. That was yesterday on Monday, and now we're hearing this. Of course, all the time concerns for violence, especially in the West Bank and East Jerusalem. East Jerusalem being a focal point when it comes to violence during the time of Ramadan. We know that an Israeli Arab man was shot and killed over the weekend in the Temple Mount. So yes, times here are very tense now, as it is. The fact that it's Ramadan and it coincides with the Jewish Passover, which will be celebrated tomorrow evening, only adds more attention to this to these times.
Absolutely, and as you mentioned, Passover starting tomorrow. What are some of the security measures in place?
Security measures, the security alert is high as it is, but since we're coming to Passover, which again coincides with Ramadan, there's going to be even an uptick in security. There's going to be a closure on the West Bank beginning tomorrow afternoon, just as Passover arrives. So as of tomorrow afternoon, a closure on the West Bank. That closure will be effective until Friday. It would have perhaps made sense to prolong it to the weekend, but in the middle of Ramadan, Friday prayers are of course a big issue, and Israel, wanting to perhaps bring tensions down in the West Bank, is allowing many Palestinians to cross into East Jerusalem to participate in the prayers, the Friday prayers of Ramadan. That is why the closure will be in effect from Wednesday afternoon until Friday morning. Why Friday? To allow those tens of thousands of people from the West Bank to cross into East Jerusalem and participate in the Friday prayers on the Temple Mount.
And Jonathan, taking a wider look at the situation until we get some more details on that specific incident, Israel is facing a political crisis, and of course, amid that political crisis, tense violence. Is this a sort of catalyst for these sort of lone attacks to have a bit more courage to come out and carry out these attacks?
I'm not sure, because lone wolf attacks, they've always taken place. They will unfortunately continue to take place. Ramadan or not Ramadan, they've always been around. Political crisis or not, they've always been around. Defense minister or not, if you're a lone wolf deciding to carry out an attack.
But our neighbors are keeping a very close eye on the situation.
Absolutely, no. When we speak of Hassan Nasrallah and the Hamas leaders and Yahya Sinwar and so on, they look at the situation very clear, and they perhaps can miscalculate and think that Israel is in a weaker position. But as far as the lone wolf is concerned, they just wake up in the morning, grab the closest knife or the closest car they can get, and try and hit the first Israeli they see.
And as you mentioned, defense minister or not, what's the situation on that front right now with Yoav Gallant?
Well, the defense minister was fired, but not fired. An Israeli startup, I would say, or startup nation, right? So firing the minister, but not firing him at the same time. The Minister of Defense got the announcement, just like the entire people of Israel, that he will be fired. But there's a process. The process includes sending a letter from the Prime Minister to the Defense Minister, which goes into effect 48 hours later. The Minister of Defense was perhaps given the announcement that he will be fired, but that official letter was never sent. So he's still in office. And we just heard from people close to the Prime Minister saying that due to the security concerns, for the moment, Yoav Gallant will remain in office. Are the security concerns now more grave than they were a week and a half ago when Yoav Gallant was told that he will be sacked from office? The answer is no. Are the security concerns going to go away after Ramadan or in 2 or 3 or 5 months? The answer is no. So I would say that I think that Benjamin Netanyahu understands that firing Yoav Gallant from the Ministry of Defense is the wrong decision. How to come out of it politically in a good situation, I think this is the delicate game which Benjamin Netanyahu and his closest associates are now playing.
And as all of this is happening, the cabinet approving to give Itamar Ben-Gvir a national guard that would be tackling nationalistic terrorism. How would that work in terms of working with the police, working with the IDF in tackling an incident like we saw just now?
A very good question, because the assumption, especially of all those who oppose the National Guard, is that this is a private militia for Itamar Ben-Gvir. This is what they're saying, and that because now the Israeli police, as controversial of a figure as Ben-Gvir may be, the police is acting mainly under the commissioner. We see a lot of friction between Minister Ben-Gvir and the police commissioner Kobi Shabtai, but the police is acting under the orders of the police commissioner. A lot of opponents are saying that Itamar Ben-Gvir is building an alternative police which will be loyal to him and act according on the orders of the minister instead of the orders of the police commissioner. In this regard, we have to say that after approving the fact that the National Guard will be established, the Israeli government also said that a committee will be established to decide where this National Guard what will be the command that it will work under, whether it will be the Israeli police, the border police, the minister himself. As always, there's a main headline, but it's not very clear what is happening under that headline.
Jonathan Regev, stay with me. If you're just joining us, 2 Israelis have been injured in a suspected terror attack in central Israel. The terrorist has been arrested. And joining me is Colonel in the Reserves, Alon Eviatar, Palestinian affairs expert and former COGAT advisor. Alon, thank you very much for joining me this morning.
Hello, good morning.
Tell me, how will this morning's incident affect cooperation between the Israeli and Palestinian security officials?
Well, it's an important question because we are in the middle of the Ramadan period, Ramadan month, to be correct. And I think that the security coordination between the PA authority and the Israeli side should be continue despite those terror attacks and despite those I would say problematic times. And I think that in the meantime, or I can assume that despite that, the security coordination is continuing even those days. And I want to separate between the levels. I would say on the local areas, which means the Palestinian district, Nablus, Hebron, Ramallah, and so on, there is a security coordination between the commanders of the forces, both sides. But when you come up, and when you are speaking about the generals, I mean, the headquarters, those in this level, the security coordination is relatively less. I mean, it connected to the political issues, to the connection between the government, the Israeli government, and the PA headquarters, and so on. But I would say on the lowest level, the security coordination is continuing. I think that the problem is, for example, this case shows us again and again that when you don't have any, I would say, intelligence information, intelligence data, previously you cannot prevent it before. It means that just the forces, just the units, just the soldiers, the officers which exist, which located on the junction, on the ways, could prevent it. But you don't have any tools to prevent those terror attacks while people decide to take a gun or a knife or their car and to stop and so on. So you don't have any previously any intelligence information, and you force it on the ground, in the field, while it's happened. I think that we are speaking about the Ramadan and Pesach holiday. It's on the same time. The most important thing for the Israeli side and the Palestinians, but I think for the Israeli interest, is to calm down the situation and to prevent any escalation in the Temple Mount. This is the center of the Middle East, and it has a huge impact on the ground on those Palestinians who think about doing some terror attack and so on.
And we are hearing reports that one of the injured is seriously injured. Alon, I want to ask you, what sort of response can we expect from the government following this attack?
Well, actually, I don't think that there will be any change in the Israeli policy. Maybe, after a short investigation, the Israeli police and the Shabak will know for sure who is responsible, who did it, and if someone sent him. And we can assume that if, for example, this Palestinian came from some village or a refugee camp or a Palestinian town, I can assume that the Israeli forces will enter this place and start to arrest suspected people and to take a look if there is another Palestinians that want to do the same thing and so on. But it's a tactical element, it's the tactical steps. It doesn't go up to the strategic policy, which will continue as it is.
Alon, stay with me. I want to turn back to I-24 News defense correspondent Jonathan Regev, still with me here in studio. Jonathan, what more can you tell us?
So first, the updates. We now know that the two injured are Israeli soldiers. They've been stabbed in that junction. The attacker has been apprehended by police. There are reports, rumors of a second attacker who's on the run. No confirmation of that yet. Now, basically, as this incident itself is over, we should also say that there's a hospital very, very close to that intersection, Safa Ofe, a very close hospital there. Now, the incident itself is over. Now comes a question of the investigation of who's behind this. We know that the suspect is apprehended, so police already know exactly who is this man. We have to understand first, is he a Palestinian? Is he an Israeli Arab? That may also be the case. We have seen terror attacks committed by Arabs or Israeli nationals who are Arab Israelis. And of course, we have to understand if this man was acting alone, if there's someone behind it. Just like Alon said, stopping a lone wolf, I'm not going to say that it's impossible, but it's practically impossible. Right. Because if there's an organization, there's communication between people, there's transfer of information, then it's possible to locate. You cannot go into people's minds. As good as the Israeli security services may be, and they're wonderful, they still do not have the ability to go into people's minds. And if someone wakes up in the morning, grabs a knife, takes a car, and decides to go and hurt the first Israeli that he sees, especially if they're soldiers, try to injure soldiers, impossible to detect that. And of course, if they are Arabs of Israeli nationality, then of course they're free to move everywhere in Israel just like anyone else. That's one issue. There are many Palestinians inside Israel with permits, without permits. Tracking each and every one of them is practically impossible.
And looking forward to the manhunt that is currently underway for the second terrorist. How challenging is that right now?
Of course it's challenging because this attack took place 30 minutes ago. That second individual, if he really exists, we have to say that. If there really is a second man, then tracking him down, it will begin, of course, by investigating the first individual, the one that's under arrest now, understanding if he was acting alone, if someone was helping, and trying to understand who is that possible second individual. I think the most important thing is understanding from that person arrested, the terrorist arrested, who is he, what were his motives, and if there's anyone else assisting him.